just more representation on the whole.
My impression of Temur Rhinos is I view it more as a metagame deck than always well positioned all the time deck. Does that make sense to you?
Kind of. It is pretty flexible in the sense of even though you're operating under this cascade restriction and a lot of your spots are spoken for, if you want to really bias your deck against your creature decks like Hammer, you can do that. If you would rather go toe to toe in this mid range slugfest or against Murktide, well, you can use your flex slots that way as well. So you can target your Rhinos deck if you're a Rhinos main for whatever you expect to be facing. And Trenton's Baker's list seems pretty stock in the sense of, we have the Force of figures you'd expect in the sideboard, and those are going to be a big part of the post-sideboard games. But then the main deck is just the usual kind of sprinkling of various interaction.
And yeah, from both sides, the thing I'm looking for in his main deck and sideboard, Spell Pierce count, Teferi count, Lavinia count, Dread Magistrate count. He actually has 3 main deck Spell Pierce, a sideboard Spell Pierce, a sideboard Lavinia, and a sideboard Dread Magistrate.
Yeah, so he came well prepared for this matchup, and those main deck Spell Pierces in particular, I would expect to do some good work here. Oh, and Jarvis. Okay, is this an all-foil Rhinos deck?
Is the Foothills foil? I'm not really sure.
Oh, that Footfalls is gleaming off the screen. I can barely make it out.
I meant Wooded Foothills.
Oh, the Foothills. Okay. I think it is. It's a Khan's foil, which is, I mean, we could do better than that, but already Trenton doing better than most participants in the tournament where Drip is concerned. And this is a Drip sponsored stream, so of course, Drip is at the forefront of our minds.
Fair enough. So I always found it pretty interesting that suspending turn 1 Footfalls is actually better than suspending a lot of the other Cascade cards, mostly because the threat of Rhinos, on turn 4, ready to attack on turn 5, and you can invest your mana on other things is actually pretty good.
Yeah, I think if you had to resort to just cascading into Rhinos, then I don't know if this kind of fair plan would be consistent enough. The fact that you can manually suspend this on 1 and just play this controlling game of sorts until turn 5, that actually does make up a decent portion of your games, especially when you're against a Thoughtseize deck or something. You can't rely on your 1 cascade spell sticking around. And Shield Stand moment for Will here, deploying Springleaf Drum. And do we have another 0 to leave up? We do. So Memnite pairs with the second Springleaf Drum to leave up that spell pierce we see in Will's hand. So Trenton's going to use Dead Gone to take down the Sin of Automystic. And interestingly, if Trenton had a high impact turn 3 play here, he could dead the Memnite to take blue mana out of the equation and then land the Cascade spell, the Blood Moon, what have you. But just takes down the general high impact target instead of Automystic instead.
So interesting fetching the Ketria Triome. If sometimes I think our plan is to cast Blood Moon in the matchup, right?
Yeah, so that would suggest to me that we're not going to see that on turn 3 here. From this position, I mean, you take down the Urza Saga, you shut off access to double white for Pure Soul Paladin, stuff like that. I think Blood Moon would be just fine still, but in a matchup where your colored mana requirements are not heavily taxed, you're not trying to cast Endurance over here and Fury and Force Negation all at the same time, I think sometimes you actively want to seek out the basic lands because you can still cast your spells, and then if you do draw Blood Moon later on, then it's going to be strong. So to clarify the top 12 bracket here for people asking in the chat, so there will be a top 8, but we just work our way towards that, and the top 4 participants in the Swiss, after we cut to the top 12, they get a buy into that second portion, if you like. So we will be working our way down, and the rest of the bracket will be recognizable past a certain point, but this is a way to get more players in the mix and also to give an additional incentive to to play for seeding, and also for the players who did run the table early and put up a good performance in the Swiss, they get a further reward for that.
Oh, this is a very normal play for Azorius Hammertime, which is if you want to play around removal with your Hammer and Paladin, you need to play the Hammer first to prevent an ability going on the stack.
Yeah, so there's often this trade-off where do you want to get the extra card from the equipment coming into play, or do you want the immediate equip? And in the face of interaction, often what you want is to just guarantee you can suit up something else with a hammer, because then that thing has to be removed. And so, yeah, if there's some removal spell for the Mem Knight, well, then you just suit it up on the hammer instead, demand a second removal spell, and get the cards out of them that way.
So Trenton letting the equip resolve. I think I saw a Brazen Borrower hand, but he's going for the Cascade spell first, obviously. Okay, I guess it is all foils all the time.
Yeah, Trenton down to 4 already. So these Rhinos have some work to do in stabilizing this board. And as always, Shadow Spear threatening to jump out from the Urza Saga or any other equipment tutor to render blocking impossible as well.
Pair of Gemstone Caverns, uh, another Outburst, and a Brazen Borrower, right? That's the hand?
Yes, two beautiful foil, but still legendary Gemstone Caverns there. And Trenton does have another Violent Outburst, so we will see Crashing Footfalls finally resolve here. But the issue with Brazen Borrower in spots like this is, okay, what are you meant to bounce, right? Like
Mhm.
you can delay the inevitable, but this isn't Sigarda's Age, so this isn't a one and done kind of deal. If you bounce the hammer back, the hammer comes back. You bounce the creature comes back. You bounce the paladin comes back too. So there's really no good way to use the petty theft there.
Something I just really noticed, Trent has a lot of Prismari commands in his deck, if you notice that as well.
Yeah, maybe expecting a decent quantity of hammer, especially for these bigger paper tournaments. And yeah, with just 1 minute up, I think we'll know the coast is clear here. Shadow Spear going to jump in off the Urza Saga, and then I think we will be heading to game 2 very shortly.
Definitely agree. He even gets a draw card. How sick is that?
I do like drawing cards, as long as I'm working towards winning the game at some point in the future.
Wait, you don't just like drawing cards for no reason?
I mean, I do. I'm not going to say no.
So Trenton just making sure that the Shadow Sphere is somehow in Will's deck. I was told it was open deck list, correct?
Yeah, it does look like the players will have access to each other's deck lists here. So I wonder how that changes the dynamics in the matchup, where you see those blue lands from Will. You expect, okay, the blue splash is 4 spell pierce, maybe going to have something like Lavinia in the sideboard. And then from Trenton's side, there's not too much
Mhm.
that's out of the ordinary. Like the only question is, do they have 3 Force of Vigor or 4? But that's still going to be a card that's on your radar at all times.
So they're trading phones, but the phones have the MTG melee deck list, I think, is what's going on there.
Okay, okay. This seems like something which, if there were some working companion app, for example, would be a good feature to have in there. But we don't live in the future just yet. So we may do with what we have.
So I think Will obviously is going to side in the Spell Pierce, the Lavinia, the Dranth Magistrate. I could see a case for a Blacksmith skill just to protect the hate creatures as well.
Yeah, I mean, once you're bringing in those hate bears, if you like, I don't know if a
Mhm.
1/3 counts as a hate bear, but sure, we'll bundle it in there. You're bodying in those, you're bodying in the extra spell pierce. If you also want more blacksmith mills, what are you shaving around the edges to fit this stuff in?
Um, Great question. I'm not a hammer expert by any stretch of the imagination. It is quite tough to figure out what to ship. Maybe the extra equipper, like core outfitter. There's one in Will's deck. It's kind of tough after that. Maybe I'm hesitant to cut the zeros, but I'm not sure. I do believe all those cards are coming in. Maybe we'll get a look to see what Will's cutting from the hand cam.
And then over on Trenton's side, Trenton really came prepared for this matchup. So you flagged up the Prismari commands in the main deck. Those will do some good work. But then in the sideboard, we have not just 4 Force of Vigor, you can kind of expect that, but 2 copies of Brotherhood's
Yeah.
End. And that's one that can really catch you by surprise if you are not aware of it. So open deck list, going to at least make Will aware of that bad news.
Extra Blood Moons coming in. Oh no. Are those coming out? Did we cut Fury?
I would be very surprised if Fury was cut. Blood Moon, I think, maybe does make some sense to cut
Sure.
on the draw. Like that is a card where its effectiveness really does vary play versus draw. But with Trenton on the play, I would maybe expect to see those in. I think Force Negation usually is the kind of go-to cut in this matchup, especially if you think or you see from the deck list there's nothing like Teferi or any hate card like that that you want to be tagging. So I would expect swap the blue forces for the green forces, and then find some room for the Brotherhood's end, excuse me, as well.
That makes perfect sense to me, actually. So I would assume that it was play draw based on seeding as well, and Will was able to break serve. Kind of think that's more likely for the Hammertime deck to break serve because just making an enormous creature by like turn 2 or 3 is going to be good enough in most of the games.
Yeah, and the Rhinos deck can break serve with Gemstone Caverns. You know, luck counters are finally entering the fray. But yeah, for the most part, I think the virtue of the Hammer deck is you have a very low curve. You can kind of go underneath a lot of opponents with your nut draw, and that is even easier still on the play.
This is a very awkward Gemstone Caverns on the play.
Yeah, this is one feature of the Rhinos deck is I think it's actually the stock list are at least one, maybe two lands short of where they ought to be. So in a 24 land deck, sometimes you do draw your two Gemstone Caverns, or even you draw one as a colorless land, and that stops you from casting your spells. And you have enough mana sinks, whether it's the canopy lands like Fiery Islet, the Triome, you have the legendary lands. You can always run more Presagers, Odobaras, and so on. I kind of think there's no excuse for allowing yourself to get mana screwed as often as these decks run the risk of doing sometimes.
Definitely agree with you, although I haven't played Temur Rhinos in quite a while. That's interesting. Is that better than casting Dead and paying 1?
It uses your mana. I guess in one sense it uses your mana more efficiently, leaves you the option to dead gone later. I like preserving Fire Ice just because as a removal spell, it's fine if inefficient, and then sometimes ice as itself is like fog or just actual time walk, depending on how
Mhm.
awkward Will's draw can be. And one upside of having so many cheap spells is you have a lot of decision points even in the early turns, and you watch experienced hammer players versus novice hammer players. The amount that they think about the sequencing and the what that decision entails is really intricate to try and follow.
Will definitely taking his time here, figuring out what to do.
So we have Urza Saga casting Shadow Spear, leaving up Telltale Blue Land for potential Spell Pierce. And yeah, Ice now going to be used on the either on the Saga or on Sequem Coast. I guess Sequem Coast shuts you off the Saga anyway, but and also
Mhm.
potentially deprives you of blue mana. So I assume that's going to be the target here.
We might see a situation where the ice resolves and then Falve happens during draw step after the mana empties from the upkeep. Although apparently that didn't happen.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on how much value Will can get from the Saga as a colorless land. So it could let him cast you a Stoneforge Mystic here, for example, something like that. But I wonder what Trenton would want to save Force of Vigor for. Because Saga itself is a juicy target. What else would you be hoping to get with it necessarily?
Yeah, kind of an interesting decision. A second Gemstone Caverns was drawn as the
Right.
third land.
And this is what I mean. Your deck doesn't really do much other than play this awkward interactive game before you get to three lands. And if you give yourself bad odds of getting to three, good lands, then this is going to happen sometimes. So we're fetching Hallowed Fountain here with Martial Arts and a turn. And so I guess if Will activates the Saga, you could Force of Vigor the Construct and then the Shadow Spear or whatever Will would get instead. it's kind of still translating into 2 cards, and also you now run the risk of your Force Figure getting Blacksmith Skilled or something, but
Hmm.
look, like, Trenton, because he has so few lands, has enough layers of interaction that he can Force Figure and pick a fight over it, so, uh, probably feeling okay about his spot here.
I actually like Will not making the construct because I think it's just going to be so small. It costs you so much mana that I think it's just better to play some of the cheap spells you have in your hand instead. Ooh, the Ginger Brute's in the house.
Et tu, Brute. But that one as a 1/1 is not gonna do much work, so we'll see if it can pick up a sword or a hammer or something from somewhere.
A spear, perhaps?
Sure, sure.
Hmm. This feels like a repeat of the first game.
Second verse, same as the first. So yeah, we now this will force the issue on the the force figure, I would assume. So Dead Gone first. Okay, targeting a spell. Dead Gone getting Spell Pierce. Okay. So now Hammer goes on Ginger Brute. And I think Will has to fight over that because
Yeah.
if the dead resolves, well, it's on 2 artifacts, so couldn't just instantly re-equip the hammer to the paladin, and at that point, the paladin is vulnerable to any kind of damage-based removal. But Trenton, with the follow-up Force Vigor, taking down the hammer and also the Shadow Spear for good measure.
So I guess Will did go for the equip on the Ginger Brute.
Yes.
Hmm.
And now here is Fury Evoke to take care of Pure Steel Paladin, but nothing really left in the tank other than that second useless Gemstone Caverns mocking Trenton from his hand, and a Brazen Borrower, which is, I mean, it's not nothing, but I think he really would like to have that Valiant Outburst back if possible. And
Also,
yeah,
Island is
Borrower
not a
coming
particularly.
down, yeah, just
Uh,
3/1 Flash Flyer here, just
yeah.
getting the beats in.
Island kind of a bad draw because it cuts you off of Outburst. I guess one Outburst is gone. You can still cast Shardless Agent.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing too is his lands at the moment do
Oof.
not cast Valiant Outburst, right? Because that Gemstone Caverns is a colorless land, one of two. And Trenton does in fact find Charlotte's Agent off the top to cast Crashing Footfalls.
3 mana,
So
10 power.
yeah, so
Kind of an obscene rate.
yeah, Will is on a serious clock here now. And with no equipment enabler in sight, we can make some constructs, but even if there's no obvious route to cheesing this game with some gigantic creature with that hammer.
Is this a case where you just have to trade a construct off? Because you can activate Nexus to make it a 4/4, correct?
Yeah, well, so this is 8 coming across there, and then leaving the borrower back. Interesting. I guess not wanting that to trade with the Nexus, but if you attack with that, then Will now has a tough choice between using the Nexus and making the construct. Um, because it will summoning Seiken so wouldn't get to do both. I guess there is the drum, but then the construct wouldn't get to block as well. So
Mhm.
I think Trenton may be worried about the Nexus picking up the hammer, but then but there's no Cigala's Aid in play either. So you would be able to just block with the Charlotte's Agent anyway. So not sure exactly what the thought process was there.
So, nice thing for Will is if nothing happens, the constructs will effectively be 6/6s on defense because of the Nexus being able to be activated.
Yeah, but people saying in the chat that Ink Nexus has flying, and I would perhaps I would agree with those people. I think they make a very salient point. However, we've been through one Fuel Paladin as it is, and it looks like nothing else is in sight. I don't know how secure Will feels about his position necessarily because Trenton has so many strong interactive cards from this position, but I don't think he has the leisure to really play around those. So you might just be able to turtle up behind these two gigantic constructs, though, because those rhinos, if there's no interaction of any kind, those are now useless on the ground.
Oh wait, Urza Saga searched for an ornithopter, which is not something you see particularly often. Interesting. So I was under the impression that Culture Complete didn't stay in a matchup like this, but maybe Will knows something I don't.
So I think the trade-off there is it relies on Stoneforge Mystic Living, which is easy said than done against Fury, Deadgone, everything else. But there's also so much stuff that hits artifacts that uh, putting your chips on the Stoneforge Mystic to survive, and if it does one turn, well, now you have this threat that is very difficult to remove. Just adds this new dimension to the deck. So yeah, sometimes you draw the Cauldron and it looks kind of silly, but I think it's worth having that option at least.
I'm trying to get a good look at Trenton's hand to determine what's in it. It's kind of difficult. Will has a hammer and a Culture Complete. Brazen Bar and Force of Vigor for Trenton. So that's
Okay,
one
okay.
card's live, the other one's
I mean,
might be
funnily
live
enough,
later.
we're still lacking that second green. We can't even
Yeah.
use Gemstone Caverns as Lotus Petal because it's
Nope.
at least Lotus Petal makes colored mana. So just treading here for the time being.
Lotus Waste.
From real standpoint, it's kind of scary just looking over at three cards in Trenton's hand, but it's hard to put him on exactly a second useless Gemstone Caverns. So another Stoneforge Mystic here for Will.
Also, if I'm in Will's seat, I don't really want this game to last too much longer because there's always the situation where like basically a bunch of your blockers get bounced after you block and you take lethal damage. It's just like it's kind of hard to block for Tramplers essentially.
Yeah, and I think that the game changes dramatically if we'll ever find, Sigala's Aid or Pure Steel Paladin. So Trenton
Mhm.
definitely feeling a sense of urgency to get the game over with too, but doesn't really have the tools to do that at this point. And this is one issue with the Rhinos deck, I think, is that it doesn't play from behind all that well a lot of the time. We saw here just a single copy of Urza Saga just kind of trumping the 10 power that, that Trenton put into play for 3 mana. And notably, to make room for all of these various artifact hate cards, Trenton doesn't have the copies of Become Immense that have become somewhat popular in different builds of Rhinos, and that's something which lets you make these otherwise impossible attacks and to steal those wins out of nowhere. So that is one element that's missing here as well.
5 to the dome. So Will has 2 pairs of blockers for the Brazen Bars. However, if he top decks a green source, it works out. Oh, I guess you would just move to blocks, try to block one, and to avoid Force of Vigor, right?
You could, but at that point you're dead to Prismari Command, or which would still mess you up anyway. But you're dead to that. You're dead to Fire Ice. You're dead to any spell that deals direct damage. So there are definitely some trade offs there for sure.
And in fact, Will is just like I think Will thinks he's ahead enough that he can afford to play around one of the aforementioned burn spells.
Yeah, unless he can win the game this turn, then you're kind of back in the
Ooh,
same position in a way. But
you
yeah, I like
see
that move
that
there. And
card?
yeah, Will finally finds Sigala's Aid. So this turn is going to be a bloodbath, I think.
I believe a lot of damage will be put onto something. We're just determining if we can beat Brazen Borrower, I think.
Yeah, running the numbers on Brazen Borrower, Prismari Command, Dead God. I mean, all the cards that could conceivably mess you up. I guess previous turn Prismari Command would have tagged the Ornithopter and the Inquisitus and came over for lethal. So you know it's not that, but then what else could it be? And that's what
Mhm.
Will is trying to figure out here. You see the nonchalant shrug from Trenton Baker, who and this is where you try to figure out, okay, is that just sincere body language? Is this someone trying their best to give the appearance of not caring, but in reality they care very deeply, just like I do about you, Jarvis?
Um, now you're reminding me of the tweet that Ash Johnson posted a few weeks ago about the bluff that Juicer ran. But honestly, I would put Trenton on one interactive spell, but not two, probably.
And the other layer to that is, okay, you decide you have the read on this specific combination of cards. Does the game get better if you decide to play around that? So even if you think it's somewhat likely, do you just have to take the gamble anyway? Do you have to play into it? I think it's pretty common that players identify what they could lose to and then try to avoid losing to that at all costs without realizing that in the process they're making these trade-offs elsewhere.
So double chump with Shardos Agent and Rhino. Reconsidering.
Chad seems very fixated on Trenton wearing headphones as well, which
Hmm.
lots of theories about is he listening to us and our dulcet tones right now? Does he have some kind of, secretive handler feeding him lines? I think none of that is the case. He is just wearing headphones, and we don't need to be as fixated on this as we seem to be collectively. But okay, here is hammer number one, which I guess is hammer number two. That gets
Okay.
force negation. So those stayed in the deck. Interesting.
So I like the play from Will to activate Stoneforge